Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Today's topic is how to automate your hybrid cloud environment. The agenda for today's webinar, we will start with hybrid cloud automation overview from me, Matthew Packer. I'm a principal product marketing manager with Ansible. That'll be followed by Sean Cavanaugh presenting how to automate your public cloud environment. He's a senior principal technical marketing manager from Ansible. And then following that, at the end, we'll have Hisham talk about how to automate your public cloud environment from Azure. And he is a consulting product marketing manager on the Ansible team. And he will also be showing a quick demo. So hybrid cloud automation overview. So you may be familiar with it or not with Ansible automation platform, but it really can automate everything you need from the infrastructure to cloud to networking to security. But today we'll be focusing on the cloud domain. So what is Ansible hybrid cloud automation? Well, it's really about provisioning and management across multiple clouds and container native services. And we've kind of divided it up into three areas. The first area is public cloud. So that's kind of automating against Google Cloud Platform, AWS, and Azure, your public cloud platforms. The second domain is the cloud native area. That is automating against Red Hat OpenShift, Container Platform, or Kubernetes. And then finally, we have our private cloud domain, which is the Red Hat OpenStack platform, your VMware and your Nutanix. And so this hybrid cloud is automating across your public clouds, your private clouds, and your cloud native services. Although today we'll be focusing mostly on the public cloud. So what is Ansible public and private cloud automation? So really this is where Ansible sits in the middle as the glue that kind of pulls together all your public and private cloud. So whether you are doing a multi-cloud solution or you have a hybrid cloud, a private public cloud environment, Ansible is that common framework and platform that can really pull them all together, whether you're using AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Platform, or VMware, or some other private cloud platform. Ansible is really that piece that sits in the middle and pulls it all together. Now, I wanted to talk quickly about infrastructure as code, and this question always comes up when we talk about cloud automation. And really what we'd like to say is that if you're already using a tool like Terraform or AWS Cloud Formations, Azure Resource Manager, or Google Cloud Deployment Manager, if you're going to start using Ansible, you don't have to get rid of all that code that you've already written for those. Ansible works well with these other tools. So there's no reason to get rid of them. Ansible itself can do all the provisioning and retirement deprovisioning that those tools do. But if you're already using them, you have workflows built around them, there's no reason to not use those anymore. Ansible can call those tools to cause them to run and do the provisioning and deprovisioning of infrastructure. And then as well, through dynamic inventory management, Ansible can then access the infrastructure after the fact, once they've been provisioned, to do all the other very important things like cloud ops, infrastructure visibility, automated troubleshooting, right? All these other kind of tasks that's much bigger, right? Cloud automation is much bigger than just provisioning and deprovisioning retirement. There's all these other tasks that Ansible will still be able to do and work with these other tools that you have already. And this kind of pulls together the big picture. And this kind of goes along with the story I was just saying, that we define hybrid cloud automation as, right, automating against your cloud native, your private cloud, and your public cloud kind of infrastructure resources you see on the right of this diagram. But it's much larger than that, right? It's about infrastructure coordination as well, because Ansible is also going to be that platform that automates your storage, that automates your infrastructure like Windows, Linux, Enterprise Linux. Against your network, you're going to do that coordination configuration, your security, as well as your ITSM tool. So Ansible really sits in the middle of all of this and is able to do your public cloud automation, but also coordinate that and still work with all your private cloud and all your other infrastructure that's required. And lastly, I just wanted to touch on the hosting options for Ansible. So traditionally, Ansible has been hosted on Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So that's Red Hat Enterprise Linux version 8.3 or above, x86, physical, virtual. You could run Ansible automation platform. That is a self-managed, and it can be on-premise or on the cloud. As well, now you can run Ansible on Red Hat OpenShift via a dedicated Ansible automation platform operator to deploy it. And that can be, again, either physical or virtual, on the cloud as well, and it can be on-premise also. But those are all self-managed solutions. The latest option we have, and Hisham's going to talk a little bit more about this on his sesh part, is there's a managed offering of Ansible that's on Microsoft Azure right now, and that's fully managed by Red Hat. It's on the cloud, but we manage it completely, and it has no self-management required. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Sean, who's going to talk about how to automate your public cloud environment.
Hey, my name is Sean Kavanaugh, a technical marketing engineer here for the Ansible automation platform, and I'm going to talk about use cases on how you can automate your public cloud infrastructure or your public cloud environment. So let's go ahead and get started. So we have tons and tons of use cases. You can kind of look back at the template, the picture that Matt had just shown with all the different things that we need to coordinate. Is we kind of see cloud as not just one thing. I think a lot of folks will refer to a public cloud as just like provisioning a VM or a container onto that. But as you talk to cloud administrators, they're more focused on deploying the application or their kind of business function to a cloud, and it's just yet another place to host data. There's tons of different automation that needs to happen around these operations for cloud. So as you can see in this diagram, is like deployment and retirement is just one small function within your cloud ecosystem. Is when we go kind of all the way around this kind of circle and all these different use cases, is when I deploy a business function, like I don't just deploy an app for the fun of it, is there's actually a business outcome of the application for me to achieve some sort of outcome, right? Even if I'm just deploying a website or something simple, my users don't necessarily care about what the virtual machine I've chosen is, or what public cloud I'm running on, or where that public cloud is hosting the data. They just care that they can access their pictures or whatever file requirements they need for that particular application. Whether it's a business application or a consumer application, it's always the same, is that we're just focusing on deploying solutions for our customers, not necessarily just deploying a specific point solution for one specific public cloud. So we kind of divided this up into multiple categories, and I'll kind of go around the circle in the use cases, but we got to think of, as we deploy something into public cloud, like we get focused on kind of point tools, or, hey, I just want to use a CloudFormation template to deploy this. And we forget that there's lots of different things that need to happen along that business workflow to make sure that the actual outcome you want is achieved. And this is, again, regardless, we're talking public cloud mostly today, but you can look at the bottom, is like, this is across all of our domains. And this is why Ansible is incredibly popular, is that it can fit in all these domains. So we kind of tried to bucketize this, and I think Matt will smile as we've been going back and forth, is trying to take all these dozens and dozens of use cases that happen in public infrastructure and try to whittle them down to like 3 points to kind of make it easy to comprehend and understand. We kind of just divided it into orchestration, operations, and governance, or to govern. So these kind of 3 categories, kind of everything can fall really easily in here. And I started like with orchestration versus automation is we kind of divide up those 2 concepts, because automation can be a point tool. When you have something like Terraform, where you're just provisioning and retiring cloud resources, that is automation. It can be multiple things that you're automating, but we try to position ourselves as also doing orchestration, which is, okay, I deployed something, now I might need to do something else, like check that into my ITSM tool, or check it into inventory. Like it doesn't quite just end from provisioning something on the public cloud, as there's lots of other processes that need to take place. When we go into putting this into operations, this is kind of where we could fit lots of day 2 activities. Is just because I've deployed it doesn't mean that it's completely immutable, right? Is infrastructure is being touched, or if I have people on my public cloud web console, things are happening out of band from that automation. So I need a tool that can automate not just provisioning and deprovisioning and retirements, is I need to be able to operate all these operations that are happening within my public cloud. And then you could kind of make the argument that governance and the ability to govern automation could fall under the other categories, right? But it's such a big category in itself that we broke this out. So let me go and kind of show some different use cases here to kind of make this click, because these are very high level. So obviously deployment retirement is still important. We work with a variety of tools. So I think a lot of people, when they think of cloud automation, they're just thinking of deployments. And as you can see here, is just trying to whittle this down, is like, here's 9 sub-use cases just talking about cloud automation that are outside of deployment and retirement. There's a lot more than just provisioning. As Matt mentioned, infrastructure coordination, there's cloud migration, and kind of the list goes on. And these also, something I like to talk about with Ansible automation is it's not all or nothing. Is we talk very commonly with that infrastructure as code approach, where everything is done with automation. What I want to show here is that Ansible can also work in a way where we can start small with operational tasks. Like, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, and we can kind of graduate to force ourselves into a code as cloud approach, where it's infrastructure as code. But it depends on your team. It depends on the ability of that team to automate together as a group. It depends on that team's ability to adopt each other's automation. And like, going from 0 to 100% is very difficult. So like, where you have fully immutable automated infrastructure is probably not achievable in like 90 days, right? So you can adopt automation incrementally. So I've taken these same use cases where we have these domains: orchestrate, operations, govern, and we kind of divide these up into kind of small use cases versus like crawl, walk, run. Basically, is crawl, walk, run allows us to adopt these use cases in incremental steps. So for example, infrastructure visibility. I also refer to this as like dynamic documentation, or infrastructure awareness is a term I've used before. But this is ability to use automation to retrieve information about public clouds and be able to relay that back to cloud administrators. With Ansible, we actually use facts for this. Ansible facts is actually like an Ansible terminology, but it's really easy for us to basically audit the infrastructure that we're running and figure out what's actually happening. There's plenty of monitoring tools out there, and this can work with monitoring. I don't try to say this is like monitoring or replacement for monitoring, but this is a very easy way for us to like figure out how much infrastructure am I running in AWS? What is the cost for that infrastructure? How many security groups do I have that are provisioned that aren't actually tied to running resources, and then create a Microsoft Excel sheet out of that. It's very easy to get a read-only automation started. So it's a start small, because I'm not deploying, I'm not retiring anything, I'm just getting visibility of it. This is very common in use cases outside of public cloud too. Like, we already use this in network automation, security automation. It's kind of like who watches the watchman. You can actually audit tools and customize them, unlike you can do with certain monitoring tools. And we have like our typical compliance is we don't have to start with provisioning everything as infrastructure as code, but how about I just run automation on a schedule that enforces IAM policies across my public cloud? I might force two-factor authentication, for example. This also works well because this isn't really provisioning resources. It's just like making sure that rules are being followed across your infrastructure. Kind of a way as like a policy as code, as you might hear sometimes. We can also do automated troubleshooting. So this is, again, could be read-only. So you could combine this with the infrastructure visibility. You could combine it with compliance and like a read-only. And for example, if you notice something's out of compliance, you could actually open a ticket with something like your ServiceNow ITSM solution, or a Remedy or Zendesk, whatever you happen to use for ticketing, and you could attach information to that ticket automatically. So here you're kind of doing automated troubleshooting, or you could say orchestrating like a solution. And this is where you kind of get into more cool things where you have like automatic self-healing infrastructure, right? But you don't have to start at self-healing infrastructure. You can kind of just move towards automating piece by piece and saving 10 minutes here, an hour there, as your team adopts more and more use cases. So I kind of have a huge category here is like cloud operations. And this is very common, like day 2 activities. So we talk about like reconfiguration. For example, like I had cloud infrastructure that I needed to add memory in both RAM and storage to. So that's like a very common activity is I might originally had immutable infrastructure, but now I need to go in and actually modify that because I do not have the cycles to take it down. Or I can migrate it. I can do patching, CVEs. So even in immutable infrastructure, like if I have stuff that's live and I need to do a little patch or run a command, I can now do cloud operations. Lifecycle management, or you could have it sync with Red Hat Insight. So if you're running RHEL infrastructure or OpenShift infrastructure, you can actually just integrate that completely and have Ansible go and make the patches that are necessary. Again, deployment retirement are big use cases. And again, just like Matt said, you don't have to throw away existing point tools. So we actually have modules for HashiCorp's Terraform. We have modules for cloud's built-in native deployment, declarative deployment technologies like AWS CloudFormation or Azure resource templates. So it becomes really easy to tie this in with an orchestration solution. So maybe I still use Terraform to deploy, but day 2 activities, I would have Ansible run that. And you can actually use Ansible as the top level because we can orchestrate that actually with a visual workflow. Cloud migration, this is a big use case. When I approach this, right, like people always imagine there's like a magic pill to allow an organization to take their on-premises infrastructure and migrate this to public cloud. Ansible isn't a silver bullet for the solution, but we have a bunch of use cases in this cloud migration that allow operators to kind of move between public clouds. And by having something like Ansible in there, it allows you to have a cloud agnostic approach to adopting automation. Because the worst mistake you could make is if you're moving from on-premises to something that's very specific to a public cloud, is you can get vendor lock-in. So something when you look at cloud migration, you need to really look is not just the next step, but maybe thinking 2 or 3 steps out. And this is where automation can help a lot, is do I really care about what operating system or public cloud I'm on, or do I care about what that application's doing or that service that I'm trying to provide? Cost management, this is a nice one, is just like very simply turning off instances I'm not using, turning off resources I'm not using, not paying for things that I shouldn't be paying for. There's a huge amount of stuff that runs in public cloud, and their cost structure is set up for you to make mistakes. It's ongoing jokes that you'll see on social media and Twitter where they talk about, like, I think a comic I saw recently was an AWS comic where it said like a noob to using AWS accidentally spends $50,000, and it shows him hitting himself with a rake in the face. And then the second panel shows very skilled AWS cloud administrator makes mistake, and he's like skateboarding down a rail on the rake, but then he hits himself in the face anyway. So it's very easy to make mistakes where you spend tons of money that wasn't budgeted. In fact, these public clouds have no incentive not to want you to spend money. They want you to spend money. So using automation to kind of help you save money is a very nice agnostic way for you to go in, turn off unused resources, right size instances. Like if I have overpowered instances, or combine that with the cloud visibility and just print out like everything that's running in every region. Maybe you've turned off a region or someone has left a company and they still have resources running. It becomes really easy with automation to do all these kind of operational tasks that are really boring. Infrastructure coordination. The public cloud still needs to connect to stuff where there's other vendors, other networks, your on-premises infrastructure, connecting public cloud to public cloud, connecting public cloud to on-premises cloud native OpenShift clusters. So this is where we can kind of have infrastructure coordination with all those other vendors you're using outside of that singular public cloud, right? If I need to open up a load balancer or add servers to it, or open up a ACL rule in a firewall, or create a tunnel across infrastructure, it becomes really easy to do that. And finally, business continuity. This is making sure that we keep the lights on, is making sure that we're not just automating infrastructure today, but we're automating processes that keep the lights on in the future. Making sure, like, for example, AWS and Azure both have backup systems built into them, but now you can automate across their API with Ansible to make sure those backups are taken or snapshots are taken every so often. Or you move to an infrastructure as code approach where the public cloud might not necessarily matter, but you're backing up what's actually on those virtual machines or containers to make sure that you can move to a infrastructure as code approach that's more like an immutable approach. You can manage disruptions, like maybe combine that with the infrastructure coordination use case where if a load balancer needs to hairpin traffic away from a specific region or availability zone, it becomes really easy with an orchestration automation solution to kind of move it across. So again, this is a fire hose of use cases that I'm throwing at you. There's a ton of different sub-use cases, but hopefully the idea here is just to spark something for your team, attack one of these use cases, use Ansible to solve one of these use cases, and save yourself 10, 20 minutes. Just start somewhere small. And with that, I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Hisham, and he's going to actually do some slides, but he's also going to show a demo and dive into things you can do that are cool on the public cloud.
Sean, thank you so much. Matthew, thank you. Yes, I'm going to focus in on public cloud environments and specifically talking about the Red Hat Ansible automation platform on Microsoft Azure. We're talking here about, automating in a hybrid cloud environment, but what a great way to be able to also deploy the Ansible automation platform and have it managed for you. So as an organization, you get the focus on automating and orchestrating and all these wonderful use cases that Sean was just discussing. And we, Red Hat, worry about upgrading the environment for you, managing it, doing the caring and feeding of that environment. You get to focus again on your business and enhancing your automation posture within your organization. Having said that, I'm going to touch on Ansible Automation Platform on Microsoft Azure, and we'll jump right in. Now, one thing you probably have seen over the last few years, right, is from a Red Hat perspective, we have our open hybrid cloud strategy. And as part of that strategy, we want to bring more of our enterprise grade open source offerings to you where you conduct your business. So more and more organizations are running their businesses out of these different hyperscalers while they still have some on-premises private clouds as well. So how do you manage the complexity of using one or more public cloud and have one or more private data centers geographically dispersed? This is where, again, we want to help you solve that. So you're seeing more and more solutions from Red Hat become available in these public clouds. Now, we've been doing this for a while with OpenShift on the different types of OpenShift like ARO, OSD, ROSA, etc. But now Ansible Automation Platform is also becoming a managed service. How easy is it to deploy, especially right now in the Microsoft Azure cloud? It's super simple. You simply go to the marketplace and we actually provision this for you as a private product. And then from that marketplace item, you're going to go ahead and deploy it. Really simple to deploy from your marketplace. And within a matter of minutes, you're going to be up and running and starting to be able to automate within your organization. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to walk you through that in a demonstration here very shortly. Now, what are some of the benefits that you're going to get from leveraging Ansible Automation Platform on Microsoft Azure? Right. So the benefits here are it runs right in your Azure cloud. So right in your Azure subscription, you get to deploy Ansible Automation Platform. So complete visibility of the environment that you deploy. We integrate into a number of different Azure services, right? So it's integrated into Azure billing. You're going to be able to see it, the cost of it right on your Azure monthly bill. It integrates into other Azure services like Azure AD, Azure Key Vault, Azure Storage, all these other components. We're actually integrating and taking advantage of these services, and you're able to leverage the Azure collection to even perform additional automation against that environment, which again, I will touch on. The beautiful thing about this offering is that you never have to worry about upgrades, right? So, sometimes you still talk to customers who are still leveraging, Ansible Tower. They haven't moved to Ansible Automation Platform. And it's because they've struggled to kind of keep the environment maintained because they have so many other priorities. Well, the beautiful thing about this offering is, again, we take care of that for you. We have a team of SREs that are here ready to help you. As soon as you deploy, we manage it, we upgrade it, we do everything from supportability perspective in addition to helping you as well as you move forward. And again, you focus on automation. As I mentioned, it integrates right into your Azure bill. which is a huge benefit for a lot of organizations that are leveraging the Microsoft Azure cloud. But a lot of organizations also have the Microsoft Azure consumption commitment agreements, right? So that committed spend, this solution can go towards that committed spend that you potentially have with Microsoft, right? So again, that's another huge benefit for many organizations. Now, you see the benefits here on the very left of this slide, but what I want to touch on is, again, we're talking about hybrid cloud automation, right? Not just Azure automation. So while I'm deploying this offering in the Azure cloud, I'm not limited to only automating my Azure resources. I can also automate across my private cloud environments, right? I can automate against other cloud environments that I'm potentially leveraging. Maybe I'm leveraging AWS or GCP. I'm still able to perform automation across my entire hybrid cloud environment. So again, I can get into network and security use cases, compliance use cases, ITSM integration, monitoring analytics. So all these really cool use cases that Sean was just sharing with us, right? We're able to do that. So physical, virtual, public cloud, private cloud, you're able to address this from this managed application that you get to deploy in the Azure environment. Now, just a quick note here. So Azure has a specific construct. It's called a managed application. It doesn't exist in some of the other clouds, but in the Azure cloud, a managed application is an application that a customer would deploy or a consumer of the Azure cloud would deploy from the marketplace, but the publisher or the provider of that application, has access to a shared resource group that allows that provider, in this case Red Hat, to perform the support and upgrades of that environment on your behalf, right? So again, you deploy it into your account, as you can see here. It runs in your cloud. There's just a managed resource group that the Red Hat SRE team has access to help you do everything related to manageability and ongoing support of that environment on your behalf, okay? So it really simplifies things for you. And again, we help keep you up to date and current at all times. Now, I wanted to, again, just highlight what I mentioned earlier is that, hey, if I'm deploying this in Azure, right, do I only automate against my Azure resources, or can I automate against other environments? And the reality is I can automate anywhere I want, right? And so you can see here the red bar and the blue bar. So what we're saying here is I'm not necessarily telling you, please use this solution on Microsoft Azure if you don't want to, right? If you want a managed solution, this is honestly a great solution for anybody. But a lot of organizations still say, hey, we want to deploy it ourselves. Whether I deploy it on-prem or in the public cloud, I still want to perform a self-managed deployment. That is your choice, right? So we're just giving you additional options and additional choices to help you with the manageability of the environment. So if you choose to, you can deploy in the public cloud. And today it's available in Azure. And with time, we're going to provide more hyperscaler announcements around the availability of Ansible Automation Platform in additional hyperscalers. Okay. So again, I'm not saying this is the only option. You get to choose where and how you want to deploy. We're just trying to make this offering easier for you to consume, easier for organizations where they conduct their business and run their businesses. All right, so now what we're going to do is going to take you through a live demonstration of this offering. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. So just give me one moment here. All right, here we go. And hopefully one of the folks on the call can just confirm that we can see my screen. I'm assuming yes, so I'm just going to keep moving forward. So here we are in Microsoft Azure, right? So as, again, a consumer of Azure, I conduct my business here in Azure. I leverage other public clouds. I also have a large private data centers, globally dispersed and I want to be able to manage and automate against them, well, the first thing I want to do is go ahead and actually deploy this offering. So very quickly, what I do, I'll go to the marketplace, okay, and I will go to this private products tab here. And yes, you're seeing multiple here, but that's because I'm doing testing, so I'm seeing that. But you will see this one here that is highlighted with private. So you will select this. This is the Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform on Microsoft Azure. There's some additional reading and some videos and stuff like that to entertain yourself with if you'd like. But then we're just going to go ahead and say create. So here we are. I get to deploy this in my Azure subscription. So I get to choose which of my Azure subscriptions I want to deploy it to. And then I also get to say, hey, do I want to actually create a new resource group as part of this deployment? Maybe I do. I can just simply click create new or just leverage one that's there. In my case, I'm just going to deploy here to East US. That's great. We do actually offer a number of different regions here to deploy to. And then here's the default name. And then another thing I'm going to do is just provide a quick password. So I'm just going to grab something here so I don't fat finger it and make it a lot easier for me to make sure that it matches. Here we go. There we go. And now we can deploy this with a private or public access. The public access just simply says, we're going to actually deploy this in a private virtual network within your Azure environment. But if you say public, what we're going to do is through an application gateway, we are going to expose the URLs of both the Ansible Automation Controller and the Private Automation Hub URL to the public internet, right? Some customers want that, some customers don't. As a matter of fact, a lot of customers don't. They want to deploy this completely privately because they only want to be able to get access to it within their private network, right? So you get to choose which one you want here. And then one thing I want to highlight here is this managed resource group. Again, this managed resource group is where our Red Hat SRE team will have access to that. And you're going to agree to that here on the next screen as part of the Microsoft policy for their managed application construct. But again, that's what we will get access and visibility into. And then from an SRE perspective, to be able to help you with the ongoing management. So here you go down, you validate everything, yes, yes. And here you see co-admin access permission. I just agree to this and I'm going to click on create. Okay, and that's it. And then you just walk away, you come back 45 minutes to 60 minutes later, depending on the region you're deploying to and how busy it is, and it'll come back and everything's good to go. Now, I've already deployed one. And so I've actually deployed it in my HMRG resource group. And you can see here is my ABU AAP deployment. So I'm going to click on that. It's a managed application construct. I can see this managed resource group. So again, this is a resource group that the Red Hat SREs have access to help you as a consumer of this offerings with all the updates and support. But for me to launch this, I simply go over here to parameters and outputs, right? So now I'm able to see the URLs, right, for the controller URL, the automation hub URL. And as long as I perform some of the networking things that you need to do, so like you have to do some network peering, you want to access this from on-prem, you're going to potentially have a direct connect, or you're going to have to do some transit routing. So there's some networking things that you're going to have to do. That's regardless of whatever managed application or SaaS application that you may leverage, right? You have to do that. So here are these URLs. Great. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to launch those URLs and log in, and here I am. I am an Ansible automation platform. Now, the beauty of this now is that any feature that I have in the Ansible automation platform, if I've installed it myself and actually done a self-managed installation, if you will, all the same features exist. So whether I'm in doing a managed deployment, right, like this one, a managed application deployment, or a self-managed deployment, all the same features exist. So we'll go through a couple of these. The next tab here is the Automation Hub, which I'll come to in a moment. But really quickly, I can see what's going on in my environment. I can see the jobs. And so what I'll do is I'll actually just quickly launch something just for the sake of time. I'll launch something to get it started. So I have, for example, a real elaborate workflow here where I can look at, and it's doing some really elaborate things, right? So workflows is basically taking a number of different playbooks and wrapping configuration around each of those in a job template and starting to link these, right? Some can be serial, some can be parallel. If you fail here, what to do. On success, do this, right? So you get really cool, flexible code that you're able to leverage and consume these different bits in different workflows, right? So this is an elaborate workflow, which will take some, time to execute. But if I go back really quickly, I have another one here where what this one is doing is it's actually creating a resource group, creating a virtual network, adding the subnet, public IP, network interface, et cetera, finally creating the Windows 22 DC server for me and doing some configuration management, adding a user, right, setting it up for RDP, et cetera. Everything is good to go as part of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on launch and you'll see this start to kick off, right? Now, this is a very simple workflow. It's more serial, not as complex as the other one. That's why I'm running this one for the sake of the demo and for the sake of time. It'll take less time to go. And that's it. So now I'm able to consume and leverage this environment. Again, this one specifically I'm doing in Azure, but remember, I can automate in AWS, I can automate in GCP, I can automate in other clouds, I can automate any of my, private cloud environments as well as part of this, right? Now, having said that, we make it really easy for you because we provide a ton of Red Hat certified content, right? So if I click on this other tab here, first off, I'm going to the public automation hub, right, which is available on console.redhat.com. I just want to show you some of this, right? Hey, you want to automate against your AWS environment? Do you want to automate against, want to integrate IT ServiceNow, ITSM, right? So ServiceNow, you want to automate against your GCP environment? Great. You have all these Red Hat certified collections that you're easily able to consume as a subscriber to the Ansible automation platform and leverage as part of your automation journey, right? So really easy. What you do here is you basically just synchronize this data into your private automation hub. But let me show you what one of them looks like. So we're specifically talking on Azure, right? So if I go here, I type Azure. This one is called the AZ collection. That's the Azure collection. It has 258 modules, right? And so if I go to just take a quick look at this, I'll go to the content because this is where you're going to see where the modules are, the inventory module as well. So you can take a look at this. I can manage Azure Active Directory groups, right? If you scroll down, I can do user management. I can do policy management. I can do AKS, Kubernetes management. I can do database management. So anything you can think of, we actually have modules for you to manage. The great thing about leveraging these is we interrogate the control plane API on Azure directly, so you don't have to worry about it. We have all these modules built for you, and you get to really just leverage, really quickly these modules. So for example, here's one, I get Azure Subnet Facts. One of the use cases that Sean said, hey, you want to capture facts and do some reporting. So maybe I want to click on this module, for example, and I can go in and I can see what are the parameters that are available for me. But not only that, but we provide you examples. So we make it super simple for you to essentially create some of this automation content because we give you the examples around each of these, right? Now, again, what you do is this is on the console.redhat.com. All you do is you go ahead and as part of your deployment, you're going to get a private automation hub. So in the private automation hub here, right, what you're going to do is you have your certified collections. You can go in and pull down community collections and synchronize that information here, as you can see. And that's really super easy to do because you just go here to repo management, remote, and you just basically say, what are the community content collections that I want to pull? But I also want to pull in all the Red Hat certified ones. So you can see here, I just recently updated this as well, and I just synchronized it in. Beautiful. I have all that here. Private Automation Hub, this becomes your, think of it as your private automation content registry, right? So you pull in the Red Hat certified content, you pull in any community content. If you build and publish your own, you can actually publish it in here. So when you go to collections, you can actually publish your own that you will then able to see and leverage here. And the great thing about this now is that you've made it available here. Your automation controllers are easily able to consume this. So here's an example. Not only content, but also execution environments, right? So execution environments, think of them as container images that are customized with the collections that you want based on the type of automation that you're going to leverage. So we spin up these container images and we perform automation based on how you've defined these and how you've defined your projects and your job templates. But you can actually create your own, pull them in here. So you can see here, I've created my own supported RHEL 8.1. I've pulled it in, and now I can go in and say, hey, I want to use this in controller. So essentially I'm tying it to my controller that was also deployed, in this case on Azure. So my controller can now leverage this execution environment. And again, so this is my custom execution environment. You can build your own, integrate them into your controller. Now, one last thing I'll do here is I'll go back, and you can see here that this workflow completed, right? So it's all good. Everything's successful. We have greens on all the job templates here. Excellent. If I really want to go in and see some additional detail, I can, right? And go in here and do that. But what I want to end with here is I'm going to go back to my resource groups. I'll just do a quick refresh here. You see this one just showed up, Azure Demo. So you can see here, I provisioned a network security group, the network, the virtual machine. So really in this case, this wasn't really just about deploying a VM. I was doing here network automation. I was doing infrastructure automation. I was doing also configuration management. After I've deployed this Windows server, I've performed configuration management. So again, there's tons of use cases, as Sean mentioned, right? So this here, I just really kind of, again, just getting you excited about being able to do this in a hybrid cloud environment, in a public cloud, other public clouds, as well as your private cloud environment. So at this point, and for the sake of time, I'm going to end it here, and we're going to switch over to the live Q&A, and we're going to start taking questions for you. So please start filling in your questions in the Q&A window.
Thank you, Hisham, for that. So I'm live here with Sean and Hisham. We're all sitting in the same room. So I put in any questions you have in the live Q&A. We have one here now. The question is, and Sean, you can take this one. What if all my infrastructure and applications are hosted on-prem now? How can Ansible help me migrate to the cloud or to container-based applications?
So there's hopefully your volume's okay. So there's a bunch of different strategies you can make. So there's obviously like traditional applications. There's a containerization. There's just moving simple storage or something over to the public cloud. So Ansible can
Send to yourself.
Oh, center myself. Fine. So Ansible can make it can help in a variety of ways. And it's something we can do like a more deep dive webinar on is like, for example, just like you automate provisioning or application deployment, you can also automate auditing existing infrastructure. So you might not even know all the applications that are being used in certain web servers in your environment. For example, I think like Automation Controller itself, if you look at that application and you were saying, I want to redeploy Automation Controller, we actually use Postgres, we use Nginx. So there's a variety of different services under the hood, and we kind of wrap that. So Ansible could easily go in with a DNF module, a Yum module, an apt-get module, depending on the Linux infrastructure you have, and just audit and see what are all the services I'm running, what are all the configuration files associated with those services. And then you could capture and just fetch them down. So it can create a little like a stamp of what's happening so that you can recreate the infrastructure. There's also migration tools out there. Obviously, being biased as Red Hat has some really easy ways to migrate, not just from Fedora or CentOS to RHEL, but going from RHEL to RHEL, it becomes really easy to image build and take an on-premises RHEL and migrate it to a RHEL where it's all automated beneath the covers where you don't have to worry about it. And then you're just simply using Ansible as an orchestration mechanism. Then the final one is like, we can definitely help going from traditional applications to container or cloud native. This is where we kind of work with other Red Hat tools. So like Ansible itself went through this transformation. So our engineers are kind of used to it as we migrated from a virtual environment architecture and kind of traditional architecture to a containerized architecture where we take advantage of both either Podman if we're running on RHEL, or we take advantage of OpenShift if we're doing Kubernetes. So there's some steps we can help you in there. It's not just like press a button and we magically migrate a traditional application architecture to a cloud native architecture, but we can help kind of create and orchestrate that process of figuring out like what's running now, what's happening, and then even build out those containers and start migrating them over. Unfortunately, it's like a multi-step process. There's no easy like one button fits all migration tactics. And that's why a lot of organizations fail when they try to migrate to public cloud, because they just think there's an easy button. Like, I want to move this server and my server rack and this floor into my public cloud. And sometimes you have to reinvestigate, like, does that even make sense? Am I just putting a massive server bill that I'm not even taking advantage of? So a lot of times it's an opportunity to take a step back. And Ansible is just one tool in that tool chain to orchestrate the processes of migration for those workloads into public cloud.
Cool. Thanks, Sean. We have a couple more questions here. One is there any other cloud providers that propose to create Ansible automation platform? And I think that's one for you, Hisham. Yeah. I think you got that?
Yeah, so thank you so much for that question. So as I mentioned during the earlier part of my presentation and the demonstration, if you will, it's what we're trying to do from a Red Hat perspective is really bring our Ansible automation platform to you as an organization, wherever you may be conducting your business, right? And so as a result, the demonstration I showed you is Ansible automation platform on Microsoft Azure, right? Which is a service that we will help manage for you, but you get to deploy within your organization. Now, having said that, we are looking to continue to bring Ansible automation platform to other hyperscalers like AWS and GCP. So you will hear more announcements. I'm not able to give you specific dates here, but you will hear more announcements on AAP or Ansible automation platform on those platforms, on those hyperscalers around the Ansible Fest timeframe in October. So please stay tuned and come register for Ansible Fest as well. And please join us. We'd love to see you there, whether you join in person or attend some of our virtual sessions. So please join.
Where is Ansible Fest this year, Hisham?
It's happening in Chicago, so in the Windy City. So, please join us. Again, we'd love to see you. The three of us will hopefully be there in person. And so please join us if you can.
Thank you, Hisham. And the next question we have is another one for you. Can you just explain again the execution environment?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for that question as well. Really appreciate it. So as I mentioned in the demonstration, right, I touched on, having your execution environments and being able to build additional execution environments and bring them into your private automation hub, which becomes your automation content repository, right? That's where you have your own Red Hat certified content, any custom content that you build, but also your execution environments, right? So think of your execution environments as containers that spin up when you want to trigger or when you perform any type of automation, whether it's automation that you click the button on to trigger or whether you have scheduled automation and it gets triggered automatically for you. So we spin up this container image and then that goes out and performs the automation for you. What is that execution environment? Again, it's a container, but in that container, you have the Ansible core, you have any other Python dependencies in there. In addition to that, you have any potential custom collections that you may want to leverage. So let's say, for example, you're doing some automation on-prem, you have Cisco gear, you have RHEL, you have other components. So you may have those certified collections in that execution environment. So all the dependency is wrapped within that execution environment and it spins up
and executes. Sean, do you have anything to add to execution environments?
I think I'll just add that execution environments, sometimes the idea of containerization can scare infrastructure engineers. And what we've done here is we've leveraged other Red Hat technologies, but made it easy. So everything in execution environments is wrapped with Ansible commands. So if you're used to Ansible, like open source community Ansible, it's not that hard to understand execution environments, and it helps a lot. Like if we're going from my laptop to Hisham's laptop and we try to get them migrated over there, I might have dependencies on my laptop that I installed, like Boto3 SDK for AWS. Now I can just package that into an execution environment and not have to worry about that. It becomes much easier to use, but you don't have to be a container expert. It will help if you already know containers and containerization and understand how they work. You can look underneath the covers and understand it. But from an Ansible standpoint, it's really easy to adopt, and it's just helping. Like it's something that just naturally evolved because it's easier to package and distribute it. And it kind of helps with those new technologies like automation mesh. So we didn't talk about on this webinar that much, but it's a huge game changer for scaling out automation like worldwide, and then adding resiliency and capacity to your automation. And that's a big difference between community Ansible and the product Ansible automation platform.
Great, thanks, Sean. I see another question has come in here. I think I'm not sure who wants to answer this one to you guys.
Is it the Windows one?
Yeah. So the question is, are Windows servers supported as Linux, Unix, Ansible clients, and which language is used?
So the Windows servers are supported. We try to stay out of the desktop automation, and when supported, I say they're a managed host, meaning we can automate Windows servers. We don't really support Ansible as a control node on a Windows server today. So we actually only support the product on RHEL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, or OpenShift, or the managed offering that Hisham had brought up. But to manage Windows infrastructure, that's super common, actually. It's very huge. As people just want to treat their Windows infrastructure like they do their Linux infrastructure, and that's a huge part of kind of breaking down those silos that we try to do. We're actually, I think I saw some talks that were reviewing Ansible Fest talks. There's one on Chocolatey, which is application management for Windows Server, where they actually want to come talk at Fest about that. So it's quite common to do infrastructure management and automation for Windows servers. I guess the second question is, we don't actually install anything on managed hosts. For Linux hosts, we'll use Python for the most part because Ansible is written in Python, but technically the way Ansible is written is it can be any language. It just parameterizes a module. The module can be written in any language. And then in Windows case, it's actually written in PowerShell. So when an Ansible module kicks off, it will copy a PowerShell script to that Windows server, execute that PowerShell script. It will then return a JSON payload of what ran on that Windows server and then delete itself off. And it's very similar to how Linux infrastructure works, except it's just PowerShell versus Python for the most part. But there's no runtime application that's installed. There's no client that's on the Windows server. It's all agentless, similar to how it is for Linux infrastructure. So hopefully that answers the question there. And there's a bunch of Windows content on Ansible.com.
Perfect, John. Thank you very much. I think that's the end now. There's no more questions. What I'd like to do is just plug again, as we discussed, Ansible Fest is in October 18th to 19th in Chicago. If you want to learn more about automation, what other organizations are doing, what the future looks like, please join us there. And as well, if you go to the end of the slide deck, which is accessible as part of the webinar, you'll see there's some resources to learn more about the products, learn more about our platform on Microsoft Azure, as well as trial options and our self-paced lab. So please explore the links to learn more. And we really thank everyone for attending and all the great questions. And thanks for attending, and we'll talk in the future.